Wouldn't you agree we are in a time of extreme change? I think it's tectonic change, and I believe that there is something called hyperchange. This is a moment when we need some help. Would you agree with that? And I'm so excited to have an expert here with us today that will talk to us about how to navigate extreme change, the kind of change that can upset your life. So, here with me today, please welcome Mark Fowler. Good morning, Mark. How are you today?
Good morning, Lynn. It's wonderful to see you. I've always enjoyed working with you, and you've worked with me, and it's just refreshing, just exuberant. And you're right, change is everywhere. Anything you do is change. It's amazing.
That's right. Whether it is in our economy, our politics, our technology, we are in an epic time of hyperchange. And I just want everyone to know that Mark Fowler is actually an expert change agent. Yes, he has dedicated his life to helping corporations, entrepreneurs, businesses of all sizes, small, medium, large, super large, to actually change their way of handling change. He is a turnaround specialist. How many of you know what that means? Yeah, Mark Fowler with us today is not only a turnaround specialist, but he is what I call an emeritus in the entire industry of the CPA. He is a CPA, of course, and I want you to listen to some of his credentials. Mark Fowler is a member of the American International CPAs, also the California CPA Society. He has served as director of that society, as state committee chairman, and as trustee of the California CPA Educational Foundation for years. He's a board member and vice president of the United Association of Tri-County, Santa Barbara, Ventura, San Luis Obispo, California, and he's also co-founder of Rotary E-Club of World Peace. Not only that, he has had managed his own business consulting firm for decades called Stowe Management Corporation, which has been a specialist at helping professionals, corporations, entrepreneurs to shift during times of change. And that's why I wanted an opportunity to bring his wisdom to you so that we can find out from him what we need to do, what kind of thought forms, thought changes in our thinking, what kind of changes in our thinking, what kind of changes in our attitudes do we need to succeed in this time of hyperchange. So, Mark, thank you for being here. You truly are an inspiration to me. I've known you for several years. What do you have to say about this change?
Well, listening to you talk about it, there are days I wish I could forget about change, but
Yes.
it's everywhere. It is everywhere, even in the things that we do today. And we're talking to you from one of our other places in the United States, and things are always changing. And probably the most important thing for me in the work that I've done, it isn't just the crisis aspect of it, though crisis and challenge are an enormous part of the work that I've done over the years. It's also about growth in systems. In order to manage change, you really have to have the kinds of systems necessary. Even if those are simple systems, paper systems, pen and paper, or whatever, it's the routines that you may need to adapt to the new changes that are happening. Um, so the things that I have focused on, and yes, crisis and challenge, growth and systems, they all go together because you've got to be able to adapt in a way, first of all, that doesn't resist, but doesn't always jump in either at the same time. There's so much change going on. You got to be able to choose the kind of change that you can get on and move forward either in a short term or a long term. Um,
That's something that's very brilliant, that you need to kind of choose what kind of change that you're willing to address, because sometimes change comes at us from all levels. Before we go on, I just wanted to say how I came to know Mark was through my luck in finding his book. And this is years ago. I just want to really give you a plug right now, Mark. This is the best book I have ever had. It's been on my desk because it's a tool for all business people, I believe. But not just for business people, this is a tool for life. This book called Revolutionary Conversations, of which you were one of three authors, Mark. This book has been something that has helped me through change. And anytime I need to pick up the phone and speak to somebody when I'm sweating bullets and I'm especially not comfortable with the conversation, I always pick up this book first and I go through what you have written in this book on how to really navigate a conversation of change so that you can create revolutionary change in just one conversation, every conversation. And I just want you to know how much this has meant to me. Mark, you're the author, and I know that this probably has been a shift and a change for you. This probably began your podcast. Mark has had a very successful podcast of his own called Always Add Value, which is one of the values of my life, is always, whatever you do in a conversation or in building business, we want to be bringing value, adding value, creating value. And I know, Mark, one of your tenets that you stand for in business throughout your life, as you have been a specialist, as management specialist, has been to add value. And we can't add value unless it's by means of change, right?
well, this is true. And that change when you're talking about revolutionary conversations. We have conversations with ourselves even while we're talking to people because we've
That's
got,
right.
you
We
know,
have
we're,
conversations with ourselves.
that's right. And something can be happening in your business or in your life or in your children's schools or whatever, and you really do have to take a moment to realize, am I going down the right path? Am I seeing the kind of information that we need to see to be able to adapt or take control of that change? That's it's sort of like driving a car and you get behind somebody that's really slow. They're going under, they're 15 or 20 miles below the speed limit and you've got to get around them. But you've got to do it in a way that, is safe. And at the same time, you've got a whole new perspective on it. That's a very little change, but everything else has the same need. You really have to take that blink to say, am I going down the right path? And when we're working with clients, probably some of the most important things that relate to change is paying attention to whatever particularly caused the crisis or the challenge or the change in protocol. In COVID, a lot of people pivoted, and in many cases it worked really well. In other cases, they got hit by a truck.
Yeah.
You really had to think these things through, and they weren't the normal things because yesterday was something the government said, and then tomorrow the government said something else. So we had all kinds of different things to deal with that we really didn't have, 2 days ago, as that came in. But first of all, look at the environment you're stepping into, and you woke up this morning and you're taking some time to go to the work and show up at work, and you find out some things have changed, and all of a sudden you find out that life has changed a bit. and you look at what's causing it in a sort of a global way. Is it the financial aspects? And this is what we have to do when we go in to meet with clients: is this a financial issue? Is this a family issue? Is this a cultural dynamic? Is this an injury issue? I mean, I did an awful lot of work in 9/11. People lost half their business.
Right.
Um, Many of my clients did had a challenge of any kind. It wasn't like they didn't have any challenge. They had a challenge of any kind, within their life, within their family, and whatever.
Now, I want to stop the camera here because I notice when you're looking at the camera, Mark, it feels like I'm seeing your eyes go up here. So maybe you'll need to bring your eyes down a little bit. There, right
Like that.
there. That's the camera to me.
Why don't
There
we
you
just
go.
lock me right in here?
There you go. There you go. So that looks
This
more.
is very hard for me because I have a tendency. I want to watch you. I read your lips. I almost say I read your lips, but I watch your lips. I watch your expression. I'm involved, and right now it's a little different for me because
Well, you
it's
can. Yes, I just wanted to mention because as you were talking, it looked like you were always looking up, and we don't. I think we want you more. Looking around is better than always looking up.
okay.
Okay, good, good.
I think you and I chatted a year or so ago about when we were talking about how we do some similar things, in the sense of how we help people, and for me, one of the most important, even though I'm a CPA, and you think all I do is spend my time thinking about numbers, but the majority of time, whether it's a real super crisis, the business is going under or whatever, or it's just a bump in the road, or it's a growth situation where people want to figure out where they want to go next. They're sort of stagnated. It's the people, and not only the people below the senior managers, but everybody involved, stakeholders of any kind who are involved with you. Your customer, your clients, are involved with you. If something happened to you, they're stakeholders in what you're doing. And the same thing goes with a larger business that has customers and vendors, and there's always a lot of people around that you might not understand are interested in you and want to help you and want to be involved in the correcting or course correcting the things that are going on.
We do
And
have that in common. I so appreciate that, Mark. One of the things I'm very, very curious about, with given your years in the CPA business, you've not only been in the CPA business, a turnaround specialist, but you have mentored many, many others in the CPA profession. Probably many highly successful CPA firms were first mentored by you and potentially were turned around by you, influenced by you, helped in terms of change by you. Beyond the CPA profession, could you give our everyone an idea of what kind of firms have you helped over the years? You mentioned doing quite a bit of work during 9/11. What kind of corporations? Could you give us a few names, or what kind of clients have you enjoyed working with the most?
um, well,
Just as a,
because
a
most of
matter
our
of background.
what's unique about, you have to answer that question a little. I have to back up a little bit. That most
Sure.
of our business has come, or most of my business has come, because I am a CPA, but because I've worked with a lot of CPAs, and most of the business has come. My business has come from CPAs for their clients, and so I've had everything from publishers to architectural firms to construct. I've done a great deal in the construction area, because I was living in Los Angeles for decades. Entertainers, production companies, film companies, nonprofits, unions, it was just, living in Los Angeles and Santa Monica. Santa Monica is where I lived, and it's just a buffet of different kinds of services because of the people I was connected with. Like you said, I was on the board of CalCPA. I still am on the LA chapter board. Um, I enjoy it. I love it. And there is such a diverse, um, and we also worked a lot with the bankers and the attorneys. So we were always getting work from other professionals who had worked with us before and felt that their clients needed the kind of assistance that we had.
Oh, that's fascinating. Has anything stood out as a particular story of a client that you helped through big crisis, like maybe the kind of crisis that we're going through today, which can upset all of the rules of the game? All of the concepts that we take for granted are pulled out from under us. I'm sure you've worked with corporations and executives and their teams in times of crisis. Could you tell us a story?
Well, everything's if things go wrong, and even if it's not a big wrong, it is a crisis, for anybody. Um, it doesn't take much for things to go off track, and even in a small way, impact you emotionally and impact others emotionally. It's not just the big deals. Sometimes the big deals, when you're really, you're somebody's talking bankruptcy to you or something, the vendors have, staked out their claims and stuff. In many ways, that can actually be, pretty, I wouldn't say easy, but a lot easier sometimes than you might think because it's organized. People have stepped forward. There's some clarity and stuff like that. But I'll give you a couple of examples. This was a real crisis in the sense that this company had been very successful. It was an entertainment company. It was a music company. I was called in by the bank in this particular situation. There wasn't so much of a money issue, even though the money needed to be managed better. It wasn't something I needed to do. I needed to deal with the dynamic of the 7 departments that were going on, they're growing. The company was only 12 years old, but it was already, in the 25 to $30 million range in today's marketplace. And what I did is I worked with the top people. I gave them a long list of questions that I'd put out as sort of a standard one. I had to adapt it. And then we met, and it allowed them to begin to see what my interviews were producing. I had several of the senior owners attack me, not attack in any kind of a physical way, but saying, that's not true. I didn't say that. Well, not that I hadn't recorded it, I didn't record it, but I had notes and whatever, and we talked, and there was such anger that was going on that it took us, I think it was like over a 13 or 14-hour session retreat. And I didn't do anything magical, but in the sense that, we had to find all this money, we had to cut costs, we had to, set everything right. Basically, what we needed to do was every department, and there were 7 departments, had to put together a 2.5-hour presentation to the other departments about who they were, what they were focused on, what they appreciated. They needed to talk about the other departments. They had to begin to realize how these other departments were interfacing with them. And it took about 2 weeks to do because if you did 2 of those a day, it would wear you out. So we had to do them one at a time. And slowly, and I ended up on the board. And all of a sudden, this company doubled in 18 months,
Doubled in 18 months.
doubled their revenue in 18
So
months.
doubled their growth, which was that one of their priorities?
Right.
Yeah.
It was a very family oriented, and it was very important to them. This was, I wouldn't call it particularly spiritual or anything, but they were very committed to their people. They were very committed to the people that they were representing, and it was a lot of emotion. And what was going on was they were so focused on their own departments, they weren't realizing the potential and the dynamics, excuse me, that they might be impacting or not impacting enough to bring the company together. About 2 years later, I came back. They asked me to come back for a party, a big party. It was a big picnic. And somebody walked up to me and she said, "You know, this is just like when so and so's wife before she passed away." And I said, and I had never met her, I had never met his former wife, the owner's, the president's wife. But what she had been doing is keeping all these departments together, from cookies to handkerchiefs. This person had been holding everybody together emotionally. And she had passed away, and she had passed away about 3 years before I came on board, and that glue was not there. And so they
Interesting.
had to start building, and that was part of how we built their glue, was getting them to talk about themselves and talk about each other and really spend the time to honor each other in a way that could keep going. And that's why I stayed on the board for about 18 months, was to help reaffirm that. So I didn't use any of my other skills. The only skill I used was collaboration, appreciation, communication. And it's the only time I ever did it. It's the only time I ever found the need to bring people together at that level, and it was enormously successful. And if
I
I
think,
tried it with someplace else, it probably wouldn't work.
well,
It just
you know what?
was.
I think it does work. You and I have had enough conversations for me to recognize that that is one of your high super strengths, superpowers, is bringing people together to help them talk to each other, to help them talk to each other, not just talk at each other, but to actually have conversations that land. And I think during times of crisis, this is probably even more important. And you've had a lifetime of guiding people, big corporations. After all, corporations are just groups of people,
Culture,
families
families. I mean, they become a family, whether
become a
you're a
family.
family or not. Yeah.
Bingo. To have a company that will run as if its glue matters, so that it runs and it can grow and feel like a family where people have a sense of purpose and where they have meaning, that they collaborate and can take home and bring home meaning, so that the corporation grows. And then one builds wealth, which is my topic, about building wealth throughout an organization, not just at the top, not just in the middle, but rather so that everybody brings home enough paycheck so that the families can sustain and feel like they're a part of something grand. Could you speak to the point of when you help corporations go through a turnaround procedure? What are some of the key points that you focus on to help them move in the direction of collaboration?
Well, education is an important part. Talking to those stakeholders that I mentioned before, everything from, oftentimes you walk into a crisis type situation, they haven't talked to key people outside the organization, they haven't talked much to their accountant or their attorney. they haven't taken the time to talk to you. Haven't taken the time to talk to their wealth manager, even though in the back of their mind they're worried about their wealth management. At the same time, there's not only the business, but where do you get the money to invest in things? Well, all of a sudden the prime area for investing, getting the funds for investing is in challenge, on a day-to-day basis. So I've got to reach out to those to get a perspective. They've got to get a perspective of that there's somebody else in there that cares and wants to make the changes necessary. So they begin to feel like there's a team. And my goal is to make sure they don't think I'm a threat or we're a threat to them. We're not trying to steal their business. We're trying to, in many ways, give them business. We're trying to get them involved. From an education perspective, most companies don't understand the dynamics of businesses, and they think it's buy, sell, was it buy low, sell high, and that you just go out and get sales. Well, yeah, that's a big part of it, but each business is changing, it's developing, it's growing. The business at 40 million isn't the same business it was at 12 million.
Right.
And the people necessary for the 40 million versus the 12 million are somewhat different, or they had to evolve. Um, I use a model that I learned years ago that goes through three major phases. There's the entrepreneurial, there's the professional, and there's the decentralized. And as the business goes through them, there is going to be natural challenge. The entrepreneur who ran the business up until 18 million and has done everything from invent new machinery and new products to cleaning the cafeteria. Well, they do everything. And, when they start moving into a more professionalized environment, that work has got to go away. Other people need to be more and more involved in not just the next person who shows up, all of a sudden we're going to give you this job. No, you got to go find people who specialize in that and people who bring a new level of experience and technology that I wouldn't say is equal to the entrepreneur, but is right up there with the entrepreneur. The HR people need to be professionals. They need to be able to work in a growth environment. And if they don't, then your people are slipping. So a lot of the things that happen in a business to bring it into some kind of a challenge or crisis are just natural. That dog, that puppy that you got, what, 2 years ago, and it looked so tiny, and now all of a sudden it's it's a greyhound or a Great Dane, and it's 80 pounds. That's the way it happens. It just gets bigger and bigger, and it gets more challenging, and you have to change as owners and owner managers. And the things that happen to you often have not an awful lot to do with you. It has to do with the way that thing is growing. And so you got to
Could
get
you
away from blaming yourself a great deal, and because all blame does, even toward yourself, is create more crisis for yourself. So,
well said. Now that reminds me of something that you've written recently that I'd like to talk about. Now, let me tell everyone, Mark is an amazing, prolific writer. He has written many, many articles and has had professionally published articles in many of the professional newsletters, magazines, and places where that of influence that have influenced other CPAs to do their job better. He also has created many courses throughout his life. And right now he's creating an article. If it's okay with you, I'd like to share it, Mark. It's called
sure.
Change in Motion. Change in Motion. I love the title, Mark. Change in Motion, Now and the Future. And you gave me a sneak peek of this article. I have it right here. I'm really excited about it because in it, you talk about 5 lessons learned that you have learned, and these are 5 concepts really, to think about when we are confronted with change. And when I read it, I was blown away at both the simplicity and the depth with which you talk about these 5 concepts in a way that will not only apply to anybody listening here for their personal life, whether it's problems or changes in a marriage or problems and changes in something inside your household, but then in your personal life as it relates to your business. And it definitely goes right to the heart of how businesses are dealing with changes inside a changing economy, inside a changing political structure. These 5 things I think are something we all need to learn and study more about. Could we go through those, Mark?
Sure, sure.
Let's go through them. These are 5 lessons learned. And so the first one I'd like you to talk about is to determine, really it's like take a pause and determine what is actually going on. What is the strategic reality of what's really going on? It's almost like a definition stage, but it's when I read it, it's all about taking a pause, which is very similar to the first tenet in this book.
Right. Stop.
Stop. That was one of the 5 first tenets here. To stop all of your arguing, stop arguing. Let's just stop a minute and take a moment. Could you talk about your first concept?
Well, I think when the challenge comes across the table, so to speak, or hits you right in the head, the first thing people they want to do is react. And especially in business, you've got to take a pause to determine whether this is something I have to do today or something obviously I need to do something today, and maybe just stopping for a moment or pausing for a moment and getting your breath as opposed to running out the door to fight a fire. You maybe need to find somebody to fight that fire. And that fire could be an automobile accident. If it's something personal, it could have something to do with your employees. Maybe someone was badly hurt. The first thing may be not to run to the hospital, but to figure out how to help others around that situation. It's how are you going to react in the most meaningful way? If you're a leader, the rest of the people around you need to watch how you act. One of the most important things that we do, and myself in particular, is to take on a bit of a leadership role to show people what I would do in a crisis. And that's why I spend so much time with the people, so that I'm just not delegating things that you go do this, go do that. We're going to do this together, so that they see me do this strategic versus tactical. Do we really need to respond to that this moment? Or do we need to do something else and then we'll respond? Or maybe it could get cleared up. Many things clear themselves up after you've taken a breath or two. So it's, I wouldn't say it's an art form per se, but it really goes along with how you react to the situation and how you can react more productively, and the other people around you, because if you get too excited, they get more excited, believe me.
Interesting. And that would, like, somebody calls up, maybe a bank calls you and is canceling your loan or calling your loan, and you don't, or maybe you just got a margin call.
Right.
But these kinds of things that are out of the blue, out of our control, I think that is what happens the most when we get shaken from what we thought were our norms, and then suddenly, that I use the word tectonic plates shifting.
Right.
It's
Right.
almost like the earth is pulled out from under your feet. And then what do? And I agree with you. Most people panic.
Yeah, and you don't want panic. Doesn't mean deep down inside we don't have some panic going on. But the way out of it is going to be to taking a moment to be able to put your hands around it in some way, put your hands around yourself in some way, to be able to address this properly. When this is sort of tangential, it took me a while to get this quote together in my head, but I often say there's a thousand things when you walk into something. There's a thousand things you need to do, but there's only three things you have to do.
Mm.
And those three things you have to do are usually very strategic, and you've already identified that this is a super challenge and that you're going to have to put your hands around it in a big way. But trying to grab every little thing that you think might be wrong or going wrong or whatever, is just you want to grab a hold of the things that are going to change the little things at the same time as you change the big things. And so by changing more from a larger perspective, a more global perspective, oftentimes those three major things may clear up about 800 of those thousand things you think are going on. And it's so much to do with people. If you can settle people down, you can give them more things that they need to be on track with. So many other panic related challenges or things everybody thinks they need to grab a hold of, they disappear. So all of a sudden, well, I didn't need to do that. It was what they were seeing.
Interesting. So I love that quote. You might feel like you need to do 80 things, but there really are only usually three major things that have to be done.
Right.
So now,
Yeah.
number two, the second one you say is what happened? You ask the question. You ask a strategic question. What happened here?
Once
Can you
you
talk?
know that you're either going to run out the door or you're going to back up and look at something more strategically, you've got to find out what happened. Oftentimes, people don't take the time to find out what happened. What is really going on. If you're
What's really going on?
right, all of a sudden you're hearing it from one end of a department, another department, and oh, there's a fire. I don't mean a real fire, but there's something really going. What is really going on? And and if you approach it that way, as opposed to reacting, and it's just what do we need to know? What do we really need to know about this? From a tactical perspective, you grab a hold of the people maybe around you and find out what's going on. From a strategic perspective, you might be calling your lawyer to find out what do I should where should I position ourselves, and calling the right people and getting the right information. Which instead of going to your administrative assistant and running around and pulling hair out, you need to be saying, well, who can I talk to constructively and find out what's going on?
Well, that is important. Why would you do that? Is it because you're wanting to find out uh, where is the fulcrum of possible shift of action, or are you wanting to find out perspectives? Are you wanting to find out do we have a wrong assumption that's operating here? What is it that you're looking for, or all three?
Well, first of all, I don't want to waste my time, and I don't want to waste other people's time.
Oh,
You know?
no, we don't want to waste time, right?
And second is the emotional dynamic, because the emotional dynamic can create more stress and distractions. And what I have an article in Medium that talks about if you're in a challenging situation, one of the first things you got to do is find the distractions. And you could be distracting. You could be somebody who spends too much time with people, not giving them enough leeway. Maybe your emotional dynamic is leaking onto other people and creating distractions. And all of a sudden, well, what's the boss doing? Why is he or she doing this and that? And you also want to be respectful of other people's emotional dynamic, and you want them talking with you, not worrying about stuff. You want them to be able to articulate what is going on and what's happening, and you can really see people um, slow down when you begin to ask them some questions. I like to call them perceptual. How do you see what's going on? All right, now that you've told me what you think the facts are, how are you reading this particular situation?
Hmm.
What's your reaction to it? What does your eyes relate? Perception rules over fact. People can gather all kinds of different perceptions. Many of those perceptions are from other people, and all of a sudden they're your perceptions. Well, let's disabuse them of the perceptions that aren't really real and move toward the reality and get the things done that need to get done.
Wow, that's powerful. So, in times of change, when change is in motion, first of all, the first one we'll go over it again is the first one is stop, take a pause, uh, slow down. The second one is find out what's really going on, what really happened. And now the third one I think is amazing. You talk about always be aware of the law of unintended circumstances. So let's talk about that as a third um, a concept or lessons learned in navigating change. Talk about the law of unintended consequences. Why is that number three?
Well, Murphy's Law. What is Murphy's Law? Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Um, that isn't quite what the law of unintended consequences is, because with unintended consequences, you can have good unintended consequences as well as bad unintended consequences. You could overfill the glass and spill, spill it all over the kitchen table. I mean, but people have to have that, they get an idea, they want to move forward, and oftentimes they jump forward and they forget that Sally in production or George in design has a piece of that action. And if you do this, they're going to be impacted. Now, they may be pleasantly surprised or very badly surprised. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to mess somebody else's life up as well as your own life up by acting without taking that little bit of the moment and saying, well, why didn't I talk to so and so? Or why didn't I do this? Or why didn't I call the city? And when's the last time we talked to the customer before we do this? I mean, all those little things. But we're so happy we have a good thing to do that, we forget about what might not happen or what might happen.
Excellent. So, this law of unintended consequences, do you feel that it has when you say the law, does that mean that we have to really think of it as if it's almost like gravity? It's going to happen no matter what.
I think
Um,
I originally picked it. You can look it up in the dictionary or whatever, or encyclopedia or whatever. I mean, there is such thing as the law of unintended consequences, and I think I picked it up years and years ago reading spy novels, and I think it was a Jack Ryan book. I forget the name of the author, but he's very popular on the Prime nowadays. Um, and I paid attention to it, and then I started paying more attention to it. That it was something that I was doing unconsciously on some level, but then as more time goes on, something happens and you get rewarded by taking a moment not to jump right in again. Um, you get rewarded by being more successful at it.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you. I mean, I think this is so good to increase our awareness in the midst of change. And in the midst of hyperchange, more than ever, it's important for us to practice these three things. So far, stop, right? Pause. Second thing, figure out first what really is happening, what did happen, gets some understanding. And then third, be aware of the law of unintended consequences. But then the fourth one, I think, is really one of those things that happen almost instantaneously along with the change. And that one is what you say, leave blame at the door.
Right.
Somehow blame goes almost like a knee-jerk reaction to any change. What is that about the human being that brings in blame almost immediately?
Yeah, we
And
have our
tell
finger
us
out.
about
We're just ready to go. You know.
right. That pointing of the finger
Yeah,
to
pointing the
somebody
finger.
else is automatic. So how can we learn how not to bring blame into this dynamic of navigating change?
Well, from a corporate perspective, and if we're in a turnaround or I'm in a turnaround, we make we ask permission to get senior management or different departments to sign a contract of six do's and six don'ts. And one of them, probably the most important one, I don't remember if we always put it on top of the six don'ts, is to, blame doesn't belong here. It doesn't belong there for any number of reasons. First of all, it distracts in a big way. Second of all, if you were to walk yourself through, just be part of a situation or a major crisis type situation, and you go through the whole thing, by the end of that environment, you will realize that who you thought you needed to blame in the beginning isn't anywhere near the person you should have blamed in the beginning. There, first of all, there was not anybody, but there was a lot of accountability. There was a lot of things that were misunderstood. And yeah, there could be some pretty nasty characters, but at the same time, I've learned a lot from the nasty characters, and I've learned that oftentimes the things that we could have blamed them for were misunderstandings. They were good intentions. They were out of a level of stupidity, maybe, or lack of understanding. And we would have wasted a heck of a lot of time blaming them and circling the wagon on that, when we should be moving forward, getting things done, making more things happen, and enjoying ourselves and glowing in our achievement.
I love it that you say, blame often comes into the process and just simply delays the good.
Yeah,
Because oftentimes after you go through a process, you come to a solution, but only after a lot of time is wasted because you go through this blame game process. So by cutting that out, you get faster to the solution.
yes, and it is amazing how fast that it can happen. I think in that article that you've got there, or that draft you have there, I have a little quote that once blame steps in, it isn't about solutions or things making action steps. It's about figuring out what your next response is going to be, or next, grenade over the, over
Right.
the table, to somebody. Your next defense, or your next, you're just wasting time, you know.
And then finally, Mark, talk about the fifth one, which is understanding the problem versus situation. There's, I think, a very clearly defined idea between situational solutions, or is this really a problem? Is this a situation that actually could lead to something even better still? Or is this a really a big problem that has
Well,
to have more
in
resources?
many ways, at the end of the article, I talk about how these five things in many ways overlap on each other, um, but that they come in handy because if you can just grab a hold of one of them, sometimes it can make a really big difference. The problem versus solution dynamic, um, in many ways, is sort of a blame thing. But the culture, business culture, has gotten so caught up in we got to fix this. And my first question is fix what?
Mm.
Oftentimes, something is going wrong because of something down the line or something down that line, and automatically thinking you've got to fix something and you've got to jump in, or maybe you feel responsible, or you know, again, it goes back to pause. You got to realize that maybe you don't need to fix this particular thing. Maybe there's something else. Again, that goes back to the quote of there's 1,000 things to do and there's only that you actually need to do. But again, getting distracted, we got to fix this. And no, go back to what's happening, what's really happening, and begin to see that the dynamic of what you're looking at as a situation is a three-dimensional, four-dimensional. It isn't just a one-dimensional problem. Sometimes even if it's a simple thing, you take a little bit of time to see it in a broader sense, especially in business, where, oh, I had a little discussion with so-and-so and this happened. Oh, okay, well, so-and-so is one of our biggest people, one of our most important clients or one of our most important vendor. What did you, all of a sudden, well, we got to fix that. Well, if you're the leader and you're listening to this and you know that you have a very good relationship, maybe there's a broader thing to talk about. Maybe I need to talk to them and not the manager or something else. It's so easy to shoot people or fix things that don't need to be fixed. They'll fix themselves, or they will click into something else that's happening. I remember a case study a long time ago where three owners took over a business of an original owner who had passed away, and they bought the business and whatever. And then they said, well, what do we now do? And the accountant called me and said, these guys are struggling. They feel like they now have to sell the business. They've only had it a year. Well, I went out and interviewed 10 of their major customers. We're talking very large customers, and they were a distributor. And it turned out that the salesman had been going off protocol. They were helping these customers design some of their products by integrating the products that they sold. So that I remember I found out about it by going to this large manufacturing company, furniture manufacturing company, and they said to us, "Here, take this to your R&D department." There was no R&D department. It was the salesman. They would go back and they would talk to the people who coordinated all the products they had as a distributor, and they would come back with different ways to look at this new production product. Well, I went back to the owner and we started talking about it, and he was so relieved that he didn't know about it, but he was so relieved to know that he had a future and
Oh,
that there was a horizon that he didn't see. That he told me, he said, I've been wringing my hands for the last 2 years. One of our major vendors has been wanting to sell me his business, and he wants to give it to me, us, for like a third off. It turned out to be about 30% discount. And I'm a smaller business, and I didn't think I could do it. We took that business from historically. I mean, I'm not using present day dollars. We went from 2.5 million to 9 million in 10 months because
oh,
we bought that business.
You
And
bought that business.
it was all because we spent some time finding out what else was going on, not fixing the salesman, not complaining about the salesman, not trying to beat them up because they weren't doing something. They were doing something really special that we integrated into the company. And that company went on to be, I wouldn't say enormous, but much bigger than it ever could have been if we hadn't discovered that process.
So by process of change discovery, you were able to find a higher, better solution, which happened to be in this case
They were
acquiring
already doing
another
it.
business. They were okay, and so but the end result. I want everybody to hear this again. The end result was that that company went from 2 million in sales to 9 million in 10 months because of a strategic move that happened by means of something that looked like it needed to be fixed, or that it looked like it was broken, that needed in the mentality of fixing, rather than bringing someone like Mark into the picture to help with a higher viewpoint, a higher perspective. That, I think, is one of the amazing gifts that you bring to that you've been bringing as your entire lifetime, Mark. I just want to put the possibility that, when we, as you are at the end of your career, retired and now writing articles and creating opportunities for other managers to do better. And you really are in a situation, I think now, from my perspective of seeing what you're doing now, is not only being like the chairman of the board, where you're able to help people by means of your longevity, your wisdom throughout the years, and seeing how things work, how people think, and being able to counsel them. I really think now more than ever, businesses need you. They need people like you. They need more people like you, management consultants, people who will give them a new perspective, a shift in understanding. I know it doesn't come overnight, but by means of your long wisdom, could you speak to what that looks like from your perspective?
Well, I was listening to you talk about that, and in that particular case, the thing that was most important to me was the fact that the owner, one of the, there were three owners. He was the president, and I think he had, a larger share. I can't remember, but he felt responsible as the new leader that he didn't have the skills, and he had been sitting there. He'd been sitting there like he literally saying, "I've been wringing my hands for 2 years. I know this in the back of my mind is a good idea. I'm afraid to ask somebody else. They think I'm crazy. I'm a $2.5 million company. I want to buy a $6 million or a $6.5 million company, and I feel embarrassed by that." he that was that was out of nowhere, and it made me feel really good because we brought something new to him that gave him a new look at himself, at the business, at his people, and it changed everything. It went from, I wouldn't say depressed, but it went from a cloudy to a Palm Springs suns, a sun. It
Big
was just
success, right?
it was
Value added.
yes, a value add. And I was thinking about the as you talk, you inspire me to talk more. But we talk about the back to the people, and there was a big heart in there. There was a big heart connection with that conversation. He and I got to be good friends, and over the next 5 years, we worked with them for about 5 years, and they grew tremendously. Um, but there was a heart, there was a good feeling about what's happening here. We're doing good for not only ourselves, but for a lot of other people here. So,
I think that's wonderful. The kind of services that management consultants like yourselves bring, are often misunderstood, not only by entrepreneurs, but by the kind of small companies that are at the 10 million, let's say 10 to 20 million. They think that they don't really should put the fees toward hiring consultants. They think they know it themselves, or sometimes they think they do. But in hyperchange, during times like this, don't you think that now more than ever, your skill set, your industry, the CPA industry, and more than that, management consultants, and even more than that, turnaround specialists have something really to say about how to deal with change going forward? And maybe you guys should get, be the more vocal leaders in our
Catalyst,
economy.
catalyst, so to speak.
Catalysts, yes.
Right. Well, I think one of the most important things for advisors of any kind, whether it's a consultant, a crisis management, an attorney, whatever, is hopefully, it's the technology and the revolutionary conversations was developed by me. My co-authors are in there to help develop this in other areas and also add additional insight. Um, but when you're confronted with a person on the street, somebody getting lost, somebody in your leadership team, it's not only conversation, but it's coming alongside them, and it's something that a presentation we did at Rotary. You mentioned the E-Rotary Club. We did a big presentation years ago about coming alongside, and I have an article in Medium about coming alongside. It's not so much facing off in a conversation and telling somebody what to do, or even it's 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 being in their shoes a bit, okay, in their moccasins. I guess is the quote, but understanding, well, I could have been there like that. What would I have done? How would I have approached it? And how do I relate to that person and in that particular way, so that the harmony, so to speak, is there. There isn't an attack. There isn't, you did wrong, we'll blame you, this kind of thing. And so when as a catalyst, you've got to be able to write it out with them in a way that they can gather that information, intellectualize it, combust it, and use it to move forward.
Oh, that's brilliant. Can you hear, everyone, the wisdom that Mark Fowler brings forth to us? Mark, another aspect of you that I love is your humanitarian spirit. You're not only always teaching about leadership and how you can leave the world a better place, but you also are actively engaged in, philanthropic places like Rotary. But also, I want to just mention that this book that you wrote, Revolutionary Conversation, is part of a peace process that you, and as well as the other authors, Noel McDonald and Barbara Gone Mueller, have actively put this program. Actually, it is a course. Revolutionary Conversation is a course that was taken up at UCLA in Los Angeles, California, and taught as part of their management curriculum in the School of Business. Am I correct about that?
No, it was part of the extension.
Extension, and
Yeah,
this
it was part of
the business
the
extension,
UCLA extension.
and it has trained millions of leadership and executives at the
I wish
leadership
millions. I
level.
wish millions.
Yes. And so I just want to acknowledge you, Mark, on the contributions that you've made, the kind of difference that you've made in your life over the years with how you how you see things, how you bring value, how you contribute to a better world, how you help people not only in their personal lives become better leaders, add more value, create more harmony, but also bring more peace. And I just want to commend you and say to everyone here, I'm delighted and quite honored to have Mark Fowler as my guest on
Ah,
this podcast,
thank you,
because
thank
he,
you.
he definitely brings a quality of humanitarian wisdom and what I think is the epitome of why we're in business, why we want to create wealth for ourselves, for our families, for our country, for our world, is to be able to listen to the wisdom of people like Mark Fowler. Mark, thank you for being with us. Is there anything that you would like to leave our audience with in this conversation? Perhaps something that's coming from your heart right now, or something, a piece of wisdom that you'd like to leave?
Well, we sort of started this some time ago about talking about that you and I both do some similar things, and that is enhancing the value of people's lives. I I may do it from a corporate, more of a corporate perspective, and you're right. There is a peaceful, more peaceful approach to it, and you're helping others from a more peaceful approach as well. And but more from a family dynamic. And it's not that I don't deal with families as they're part of businesses, but yours is a little more kitchen table oriented. It's how can we afford to, how can we find the funds and investments to send the kids to school, and what are they going to go to graduate school, and what are some of the other investments that, not unlike the case example that I gave about the person who didn't think he could buy that business. There are a lot of questions that owners have on a personal basis related to their family and their personal investments that they don't ask unless somebody's across the table and helping them to make that. And that in itself is very peaceful because it's settling down. It's peace. It's helping them be more peaceful because they're not wringing their hands about should I do this or shouldn't I do that, or do I step forward and do this or not. So it's an honor to work with you because you're a mirror to me as I listen to you, and I've seen your podcasts and how you're stepping out there to help others in your profession to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. How how can we get in touch with you? How, if anyone wants to reach out to you, how can they do so? And what is it that you love to do now in helping people? What are you involved with, and how would you love to help people if they did reach out to you? How can they reach you?
Well, our the best way is my email, which is the letter E and then Stowe, STOWE, management, MANAGEMENT at AOL.com. It's E Stowe management spelled out. Um, that's probably the easiest way. You can look me up online. If you go online and put my name on, Stowe Management will come up. There's a website there, and there's any number of podcasts. And there's, if you want to connect with me, it would be easier. Um, the phone is a little difficult between being on phone for all kinds of different things and all the robocalls that everybody gets nowadays. We have to manage our it's another change in the world. All the hacking that goes on in the world, and all the other interruptions in our lives that are happening. What do I like to do? I like to help people. It could be a 2 hour conversation or a 2 year conversation. It just depends on the situation. It depends upon where they're at and what they need. And I'm not shy at referring them to other people if the other people they need other people. So
That's wonderful, Mark. Well, I can guarantee you that if you do reach out to Mark Fowler, you will have a revolutionary conversation. It will change your life. It certainly has changed mine. And I am so delighted to call you a friend as well as a colleague. Mark, thank you for everything that you've shared here today. And please go out and buy this book, Revolutionary Conversations by Mark Fowler. And if you would like a copy of this amazing article, just put in the chat here, yes, I would like a copy, and we will make sure that we get this copy to you, called Change in Motion by Mark Fowler. Thank
Okay.
you so much, Mark, for being with us today.
Thanks for everything.
All right, everyone. See you next time at Money Talks. Bye for now.